Every war begins in noise, except the one inside you, which begins in silence. Blaise Pascal once said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." Centuries later, his words sound less like philosophy and more like prophecy. Try sitting still for 10 minutes, no music, no screen, no conversation. Within seconds, your hand twitches toward your phone. That impulse, that reflex to fill the silence, is the symptom of a deeper disease. We live in an era that worships stimulation. Every empty second must be conquered, every pause filled. We scroll not because we care, but because we cannot bear not to. The screen became our sanctuary, our distraction, our mirror, and our cage. Technology promised liberation. It gave us infinite knowledge, infinite connection, infinite entertainment. But it also took something subtle, our ability to simply be. We became eternal consumers of noise, terrified of the quiet. Somewhere along the way, boredom became the enemy. We treat it like a virus to eradicate instead of a signal to understand. Yet boredom is not absence, it is invitation, an unguarded moment when the mind whispers, "This is what's left when everything stops." Most people never hear that whisper. They drown it under dopamine, chasing another notification, another like, another illusion of relevance. But the truth is uncomfortable. The more we run from boredom, the more it follows us. We mistake motion for meaning. We believe that if we're constantly moving, we must be progressing. Yet what if that's the greatest illusion of our time? That activity equals purpose. There is a reason silence feels threatening. Because when everything stops, something else begins, awareness. Awareness of your thoughts, your fears, your emptiness. And that's precisely why most people will do anything not to sit quietly in a room alone. Stillness confronts us with ourselves. It strips away the noise that shields us from the truth, and the truth is rarely comfortable. So we run into schedules, into productivity, into the endless scroll of distraction. But no matter how far we go, boredom waits. It is the silent enemy we cannot defeat by doing more, because its purpose is not to be conquered, it's to be understood. What if boredom isn't the void we fear, but the doorway we've forgotten? A threshold between the life we perform and the life we truly feel. Perhaps the question is not how to escape boredom, but what it's trying to reveal. We call it progress, but maybe it's just motion. The modern world has built a religion around movement. Our God is productivity, and our prayers are notifications. We worship at the altar of efficiency, kneeling before screens that glow brighter than any candle. We rise with alarms, rush through mornings, and measure our worth by how much we've done before breakfast. Stillness feels like sin. Rest feels like guilt. The moment we stop, we question our value. And so, we keep running, not toward anything, but away from what stillness might show us. We have become what philosopher Byung-Chul Han calls achievement subjects, self-driven, self-exploiting, self-torturing. We no longer need masters or chains. We carry our own whip inside our minds. Every second must be useful. Every pause must be justified. We scroll while eating, reply while walking, think of tomorrow while living today. We've blurred the line between work and existence until there's no room left for simply being. The result? A civilization of restless achievers, forever exhausted, forever empty. Speed became our drug. The faster we go, the less we feel. And maybe that's the point, to keep the soul too dizzy to notice its hunger. We call it multitasking, but it's really fragmentation. Every notification fractures our attention. Every distraction tears another thread from the fabric of our presence, until there's nothing left but fragments of a mind scattered across infinite screens. Technology was meant to serve us. Now it sedates us. It keeps us connected, yet isolated, informed, yet uninspired, entertained, yet hollow. There's irony in the modern obsession with mindfulness. We download apps to teach us what silence once did for free. We buy digital tools to help us disconnect from digital tools. Even our pursuit of peace has become another form of performance. But what are we really chasing through all this motion? Purpose or distraction? Maybe we confuse busyness with meaning because true meaning is terrifying. It asks for stillness. And in stillness, there's nowhere to hide. The cult of constant motion thrives on one fear, that if we stop, life will pass us by. But the opposite is true. When we never stop, life can't reach us. The moments that matter move quietly, like breath, like thought, like God. And we miss them because we're too busy refreshing the feed. If every addiction begins as an escape from pain, perhaps our addiction to motion hides a deeper wound, the pain of simply existing without distraction. What happens when the movement stops, when the noise fades, when there's nowhere left to run? That's when the real journey begins, because beyond the cult of motion lies something ancient, forgotten, the still point of being. And that is where boredom waits, not as punishment but as teacher. For centuries, boredom has been dismissed as trivial, a momentary discomfort, a gap to be filled. But the great philosophers saw it differently. They recognized boredom not as an absence but as a revelation, a mirror that reflects what we truly are when the world stops entertaining us. Arthur Schopenhauer called it the terror of the void. To him, life swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. When we suffer, we long for relief. When we are relieved, we long for stimulation. And in that endless oscillation, we mistake movement for meaning. He believed boredom arises when the will, that blind, restless drive within us, runs out of objects to chase. The moment our desires are fulfilled, the will turns inward, hungry again, devouring itself. That's why the wealthy, the powerful, and the successful are often the most tormented by boredom. They have exhausted the external world, but not found peace within. Schopenhauer wrote that boredom is proof of life's emptiness, the unbearable silence behind all our noise. But perhaps he was only half right. Maybe boredom is not proof of meaninglessness, but an invitation to create it. Because when the external no longer satisfies, the internal begins to speak. A century later, another thinker, Byung-Chul Han, revisited this ancient void. He saw in our modern age not a pendulum but a blur, no longer pain and boredom, but stimulation and burnout. We are not suffering from lack of pleasure, we are drowning in it. Han called it the Achievement Society, a civilization addicted to doing, producing, optimizing. We are both the master and the slave. We push ourselves toward constant activity until exhaustion becomes identity. He warned that in this hyperactive culture, even boredom is disappearing, and with it, so is depth. He wrote, "Profound boredom is not the enemy of life, it is the birthplace of spirit." In boredom, time slows down enough for thought to emerge. It's where imagination takes its first breath. Without boredom, there is no contemplation, no art, no philosophy. Every great idea was born in a pause, not in motion. But who dares to face that pause now? Who can sit in the empty room without reaching for a screen? We have replaced depth with data, silence with stimulation, reflection with reaction. We crave novelty because we fear the void. Yet the void is sacred. It is the womb of creation, the black canvas before the first stroke of paint. Every universe begins in silence. Every revelation is born from emptiness. Schopenhauer saw boredom as curse. Han saw it as cure. Both were right, because boredom is both the wound and the medicine. It hurts because it exposes the truth. It heals because it returns us to it. Perhaps that's the paradox. Boredom destroys the false self to make room for the real one, and until we dare to face it, we will remain trapped in motion, forever escaping, never arriving. When the noise fades, something terrifying happens. You start to hear yourself. Not the voice you use with others, but the one that hides behind your eyes, whispering questions you've ignored for years. What are you running from? What would remain of you if there was nothing left to do? Boredom isn't empty. It's full of everything we've buried beneath stimulation. It's the mind's way of forcing you to face what movement keeps you from seeing. In the mirror of boredom, you begin to see your own restlessness, the addiction to novelty, the craving for noise, the silent fear of silence itself. And beneath that, something deeper, an existential ache, not for pleasure, not for distraction, but for meaning. We are terrified of stillness because it dismantles the identity we've built from motion. The worker, the achiever, the dreamer, the creator. All of them depend on movement to exist. But when you stop, who are you then? That is the question boredom asks, and why so few dare to answer it. Because when you look long enough into that stillness, it looks back. And what it shows you is not the person you pretend to be, but the one you abandoned long ago. Boredom exposes the illusions that structure our days, the false urgency, the endless striving, the myth that life's value is measured by output. It confronts us with a truth both liberating and unbearable. You are not what you do. That's why the silence feels like death, because in a sense it is. It's the death of the self that survives only through distraction. And in that death, something begins to awaken, the being that exists beneath the doing. Buddhist monks speak of this often. They say the restless mind must die before the still mind can live. To sit in silence is to die in miniature, over and over until the ego loses its grip, until existence itself becomes enough. Boredom is the cocoon. Inside, everything you think you are dissolves. It's dark, it's uncomfortable. But without that darkness, the metamorphosis never happens. We think we fear boredom because it wastes time. But what if boredom is time itself asking to be felt again? What if every restless second is just the universe waiting for you to notice it? When we finally stop fighting boredom, we begin to see it for what it really is. A mirror, showing not the emptiness of life, but the fullness of being. A quiet reflection that says, "This is what remains when everything else fades." That's not nothing. That's you. The mind resists silence like the body resists withdrawal. Because we are addicted, not to substances but to stimulation. Every scroll, every sound, every flash of novelty feeds the restless self that cannot bear to stop. But like any addiction, the only cure is through it, not around it. You cannot escape boredom. You must endure it, dissolve within it, and let it teach you. At first, stillness feels unbearable. Your thoughts scream, your body twitches, time expands into an ocean. Minutes feel like hours. You'll reach for distraction 100 times, and yet, if you stay, something subtle begins to change. The chaos of the mind starts to settle. Beneath the noise, another rhythm emerges, slower, ancient, steady. You realize the mind is not a cage, but a room. And inside that room, silence is not empty air. It's the atmosphere of awareness itself. Byung-Chul Han wrote that profound boredom is the highest form of relaxation. It's not the absence of energy, but the liberation of it. In that deep stillness, creativity awakens. Not the frantic creativity of deadlines, but the kind that comes unbidden, like breath, like rain, like revelation. This is why monks spend decades sitting in silence. Their stillness isn't laziness, it's alchemy. They transmute restlessness into insight, noise into clarity, time into eternity. Each breath becomes a bridge between the fleeting and the infinite. You don't need a monastery to experience this. You only need a moment of courage, the courage to stop, to look boredom in the eye and say, "I will not escape you this time." That's when the magic begins. When you stop running, boredom transforms. It becomes curiosity. Curiosity becomes observation. Observation becomes understanding. And understanding becomes peace. We spend our lives seeking transcendence through action, achievements, journeys, goals. But transcendence is not reached by moving faster. It's revealed when motion ends. The path through stillness is the paradox of awakening. You lose everything you thought you were and gain everything you truly are. You begin to see the beauty in simplicity, the sacredness of waiting, the elegance of silence, the grace of doing nothing well. The world hasn't changed, you have, and suddenly the ordinary feels divine. Stillness doesn't erase the noise of life. It just tunes your perception to a different frequency, one that was always there, hidden beneath your haste. It's not the world that needs to slow down. It's you who needs to remember how to listen. When you stop escaping boredom, something unexpected happens. You begin to see its beauty. The silence you once feared becomes luminous. Moments stretch, colors deepen, even breath feels alive. The world slows to its true rhythm, not the pace of ambition, but of awareness. This is not the death of experience. It's the birth of perception. In stillness, time stops chasing itself. Each second becomes complete, whole, self-contained, sacred. There is nothing to prove, nothing to earn, nothing to fix, only presence. The bored soul begins to awaken like an old instrument finally tuned to its natural tone. The anxiety of doing fades into the grace of being. You start noticing what was always there, the quiet hum behind every sound, the breath between words, the invisible pulse that keeps everything alive. This is where boredom reveals its secret face. It was never the enemy. It was the messenger, whispering that there is more to life than movement. That meaning doesn't come from what you accumulate, but from how deeply you dwell within the moment that's already here. You realize that boredom was never about emptiness, it was about attention. The same attention that births art, love, and understanding. Without boredom, there is no reflection. Without reflection, there is no wisdom. Our culture calls this doing nothing, but the sages called it contemplation. Poets called it inspiration. Mystics called it prayer. And if you listen closely, you can feel it too. The quiet intelligence that rises when the mind finally stops demanding more. This is the hidden beauty of boredom. It brings you back to your soul. A soul that doesn't measure time in hours or achievements, but in awareness. When you touch that stillness, you no longer chase meaning. You embody it. So the next time you reach for your phone in a moment of restlessness, pause, feel the impulse, and instead of feeding it, watch it fade. That fading is freedom. That discomfort is your awakening. When you sit quietly in a room alone, you are not wasting time. You are meeting eternity disguised as a pause. And perhaps that's what Pascal meant all along. That humanity's greatest problem was never boredom itself, but our inability to see its grace. Because only the bored soul learns how to truly see. And in that seeing, discovers the quiet, beautiful truth that being is enough. In every life, there comes a moment when movement fails. The projects pause, the noise fades, the world grows still. And there you are, face to face with yourself. At first it feels like loss, but it isn't. It's the unveiling of what was always beneath the motion. Stillness isn't the opposite of life. It's the pulse beneath it. The quiet axis around which everything turns, the still point that holds the storm. When you reach it, truly reach it, the world doesn't stop. It becomes transparent. You see through things instead of merely looking at them. Time no longer drags or races, it flows. Thought no longer argues, it listens. And the silence that once frightened you becomes your oldest friend. This is where boredom ends and consciousness begins. Not in the thrill of newness, but in the eternal depth of now. In this still point, everything belongs, the noise, the quiet, the motion, the pause. They cease to fight and begin to dance. All the great teachers have said it in their own ways, that the truth cannot be chased. It can only be remembered. And perhaps that is what boredom has been trying to teach you all along, that what you were searching for in endless movement was never outside of you. It was waiting in the silence you kept avoiding. So, when the next wave of emptiness arrives, don't run. Breathe, listen, let the void speak. It might just be your soul calling you home. If this message spoke to the silent part of you, subscribe and keep walking the unseen path. Because beyond distraction, beyond noise, beyond time itself, there is a stillness waiting for you to remember who you are.